You are listening to the Real Men Feel Show with your hosts Andy Grant and Appio Hunter. Real Men Feel is all about encouraging men to allow and express all of their emotions. Despite what you may have been taught, all emotions do serve you. Real Men Feel is committed to opening up discussions that most men aren't having, but you certainly don't need to be a man to join us. The Real Men Feel podcast is produced live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern for your growth and enjoyment. You can find more information about the Real Men Feel movement at realmenfeel.org. Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or subscribe on iTunes by visiting realmenfeel.org/iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter at realmenfeel.org and at facebook.com/realmenfeelshow. All links mentioned in each episode are in the show notes found on the blog at realmenfeel.org. This is a weekly program, and your comments, feedback, and participation are welcome during the live show and anytime in the Facebook group, on Twitter, or at realmenfeel.org. Now, let's get into this week's show.
Hello, and welcome again to Real Men Feel. I am your host, Andy Grant. We're very glad to have you joining us for episode 48. On tonight's show, we are being joined from a guest from down under, the emotional strength trainer, Amanda Foy. Now, I can only assume that the emotional strength trainer will somehow teach us to get in our bunker of emotions so nothing can bug us and we won't feel a damn thing. But maybe I'm wrong. We'll find out, right? But before we get going, I want to introduce the beacon of happiness himself, my friend and co-host, Appio Hunter.
Hey, Andy. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, before you learn how to be so strong emotionally, I want to welcome your openness first, right?
Oh, for sure. But, I'm so glad that we have Amanda here tonight because, man, she definitely has been a real pillar of strength for me at times as well. So
beautiful. Yeah, I should point out, Amanda is a friend to both of us. We haven't had her on the show yet, but we've talked to her plenty of times. So we are just thrilled. And to have the totally amazeballs, Amanda Foy.
Thank you so much. I'm coming on your show every week if this is the speak up that I get, just quietly.
It's all downhill.
So thank you very much for having me. Okay.
But we are real excited to have you join us. I've seen some of your work. You're really a powerful, intuitive, and energy worker, an energy reader, and all those sort of things. And before we get too far ahead, why don't you? Because I'm sure I like hosting the show so I can play dumb because I'm really good at playing dumb. So why don't you tell us what you really mean by being an emotional strength?
Thank you. Okay, well, the emotional strength trainer is a natural therapy that I've developed over the last 8 years or so, and I am somebody that teaches and can help people to essentially make friends with their emotions. Part of the process with personal development and with people over time, with the first wave of personal development is like get to the positive as soon as possible. And one of the things that I've noticed in my research and with my work is that anybody that ignores the negative ends up being sick. Because we are taught that we have to, swallow things or don't upset people, don't create waves, all of those sort of things. So there's generational stuff involved. There is life experience involved. So that's why I say I'm the person you want on your health and happiness team when life shows up, because life is going to show up. You cannot have no blips because that's a flat line and that means everything is dead. We can't grow without the ordinary things. We can't take ourselves to new heights of awareness and understanding without going through the peaks and troughs. So my work helps people to stop the major extremes, but then when an extreme does happen, your capacity to cope is heightened. You have a greater resilience. You have a treasure trove of tools that can have you dealing with something for 24, 48 hours instead of 2 years. You're able to process the whole notion of why you've gone through things quickly. And then the energy therapy takes away the cellular footprint. So I have, which is the title of today's show, is The Anatomy of Awareness. And I've come to realize that one of my greatest parts and why we're all friends is that it takes a village to raise a child. Not one of us is the complete and total answer for anybody looking for help and support. So in my anatomy of awareness, I have level 1, which is where we recognize that there's something wrong. So when somebody is sitting there and says, something's not right here. And then level 2 is they go and seek out people to help, which can also be self-help books, podcasts like this fabulous podcast, psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, therapists, energy, people that do like acupuncture, bioresonance therapy, all of those sort of things. But then your energy therapists that do stuff that are attached to soul issues and cellular footprints that can connect the dots back to parts of your body, neuroscience and those sorts of things. We clear out that footprint that takes away the neural pathways and the synapses that say, here is a trigger, you're going to be sick. So my hope and life's purpose, if you will, is that I will educate people on how to ask the question, do the research, do the energy work, and then free themselves so that if you do get sick, your body will process everything quicker so you don't get chronic sick, but it's just sick. Like even for today, I have a dodgy throat. My kids brought something home from school, but my husband's crashed. I haven't, because I'm able to sit there and go, right, my positive action is a throat lozenge, give myself a bit of an energetic clear out, tell it to go away because speaking is my job, and then move on, tap into why those sort of things have happened. I'm medically friendly. I don't believe that if you take medicine out of your health and happiness regime, if it's something that you've had in there, you will go into this place of fear of, I hope I've done the right thing, which can create a depleted immune system. So the goal is to go through this work in conjunction with medicine if you have it, see how you're feeling, readdress, and then get to a place where, like I haven't had antibiotics for years. I had a great win the other day, or this is last year. I did lose my voice, like completely gone. And because I panicked, because I'm like, my life is my voice, I thought, what am I going to do? And so I went to the doctor, and when I went to the doctor, they said, oh, your file is inactive. And I'm like, because it's been so long since I'd been to the doctor, but I needed her. But then she said it was viral and there was no infection. I didn't have a fever or anything. So no medicine for you, just go home and have some rest. But it was a positive action to remove the fear. And then I did all of my energy work on myself. And I also had another lady that I had help me. And it was back within 24 hours.
Awesome.
And I needed to have a break.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
So
your body's always giving you information. And if you ignore it, you get sicker.
That's right. And then it can lead to the big nasties. And as with what you guys are doing here, which is what the reason why I want to share about that whole cellular memory thing is, here in Australia, the levels of suicide are off the charts. And something is missing because people are it's okay to talk about things, and it's a very, very, very important step to talk about it. But there are these things that are sitting dormant, and the message of, I'm not allowed to have emotions, I've got to suck it up, I've got to be tough, I'm a man, I've got to be in charge of this family, I've got to get my kids through school, blah, blah, blah. And it all just sits there and festers. Whereas if you bring energy work into the situation, it helps get it out so that the talking becomes more effective. And then you don't have so many people thinking that they're like once the chemical self-destruct buttons are in place, then that's when you're in a lot of trouble.
Right. And I love what you said. I love how you talked about that it's always going to be bumpy. Because when I was depressed and suicidal, I thought happy people were just flatlining up high. I thought normal life was just flat and you were just always thrilled to be alive. I thought that was what all the other human beings were except me. And I found that not to be the case. And it sounds like you found that to be the case too. Yeah. But it is about resiliency.
It is resiliency, but also recognizing a moment. I saw a great meme on Facebook the other day where someone had said they'd had a crap day, and then somebody came in and said, was it a crap day or was it a crap 5 minutes, and you're milking it for all it's worth? And I thought, that's perfect. If you can bring it back to a moment in time, like even if you think about, animals are a bit of an Achilles heel for me. The loss of a pet is devastating, but it's a moment that 1 minute they're there and the next minute they're not. It's just a moment, and it's often all of the memories in that that loss and those sorts of things. But with this kind of work and bringing energy therapies into your everyday, that moment doesn't have to rob you of the ability to go into your next moment for extended periods of time. That's, that first bit of time where it is and you just gutted and devastated, sit in it. You need to sit in it because you need to process it, that we're human. We're given these emotions for a reason. The two most useless emotions known to man are guilt and shame. They have no purpose other than to make you feel worse than you could ever possibly feel. All of the other emotions, your grief and your anger and sadness, and they help you if you can own them. And then you become more resilient and you be able to do, process it quicker, understand it. That doesn't mean to say that it's going to not pop up again at another time. For example, I'll just show you something quickly. I have a notion called covert trauma that I'm starting to do records of in my work because of, and how long things take to show up. I'm just peeling off a note here. So my son, I was sitting in my desk the other day and my son flung a piece of paper at me. And I'm like, oh, and he said, open it, Mum. And when I opened it, it said, I love you, with some hearts on it. And because it's all crinkled up, and I looked at it and he gave it to me, I'm like, oh, that's loving. And then I was sitting here the other day because I've hung it on the bottom of my calendar, and I looked over it, and the angle it was sitting, the writing is just like my first husband. And he was so emotionally horrible and traumatic to me, I can't begin to say. Now, that relationship hasn't had any contact or anything. Like the last piece of contact was through a letter through a lawyer 19 years ago. And I looked at that and I thought, and I had this huge, that's how my first husband's handwriting looked. And then I went into, stupid universe, why did you make it that my son is writing like him and blah, 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 because I love my son and I don't love him and blah. It was just this trigger, massive trigger. So I know that, and I've left it there because that note from my son is too important for me. And it was it's loving, and he was being annoying, like throwing it at me. But it's, I'm going to work through that, which is that covert trauma. 19 years ago, that last thingy happened. Let's go and have a look what I got to deal with. Use my processes, flick it, so that every time I see that note, it will just be all about my son and not about the first trauma that occurred, because the writing looks the same.
And you mentioned guilt and shame being, did you call them useless emotions, the only useless emotions? And and the title of the show, trying to get every emotion's okay to feel, they all serve you, is kind of where we're coming from. And so I wonder, like that viewpoint that they're useless, is that because they're kind of the emotions that, do they show up because you judged other emotions? Is that like the residue you get?
Guilt and shame, from my mind, guilt and shame, all they do is make you feel revolting. You take other people's soul agreements, you take other people's situations, you take responsibility for absolutely everything, and you own it. So when that shows up for me when I'm doing an energy session, the person's energy shows up with their hands over their face. They can't show their energy face to me, so it's like this, and it's always sort of down, often sobbing and crying because they can't get past the guilt and shame of what they've done, even though it's a whole series of things that comes about to create a situation. So from my mind, the reason why they're useless is because they do nothing other than to make you feel bad or worse. And it's a record player going in your head. If you sit in a state of guilt without positive action of recognizing your responsibility in a situation, going into acceptance that you had that part to play, but there's also other parts to play. It's not a blame game. It's like guilt and shame is complete blame here.
Mm-hmm.
And we know blame is not a great thing either, because there's no responsibility in blame. But guilt is acceptance without positive action and without responsibility to a set of circumstances, which means you're in a pig swill of a well that has no steps. You've got to sit there and try and grab something, and it's all slimy and gross and you can't get out. It serves no purpose other than to keep you where you're stuck. And shame, again, is lack of acceptance and lack of acknowledgement that we're having a human experience. So when, this high idea that we are meant to be at a certain level, and that's where you can bring in religion and you can bring in what will other people think and all of those sorts of things. See, and shame is also a very personal thing. It's the same with what I say with emotional trauma. Trauma is defined by the person. What I might find traumatic, you might not. What I might find shameful, you might not. It's all a part of who we are and what we're taught and how we're expected to be. And one of the greatest things I think in our generation is that we came from, or have come from, people who had the two generations before us had a very different set of circumstances that they lived with to what we are today. No technology. You had also things like the Depression, the wars. There was even in 1919 the great big flu epidemic that wiped out millions of people all around the world. So the ability to lose something in a nanosecond was a common theme in those two generations. We're sitting here living with people that ate all of your dinner because people can't have food, but that's not your fault. There's no, like, unless you're somebody that has gone and sprayed a paddock with DDT to kill everything and everyone, that's not a responsibility. You can make a positive choice and do something and donate to people that help. But the shame of leaving your peas on your plate because somebody starved 10 years ago isn't an energy that's going to do anything. Shame around sexuality is another biggie. We've come from two eras that, I'm glad we're alive in this era, because it's a lot more forgiving and a lot more tolerant and a lot more normal to be able to see two men holding hands walking down the street, or two women holding hands walking down the street, wanting to get married, recognizing what love is. There's there's still a lot of work to be done by all accounts. But the people that get to live with the closer and closer without the shame, but then letting down your parents and letting down the family, and I could go on, but it's all useless. Positive action will take it away. It's there for a reason, but it's it's the two that I recommend people get onto as quickly as possible, because you can't make real change until you just let it go.
You know, that's such a fascinating perspective that you shared. And, you know, I would say that I would absolutely, you know, agree with you as far as the guilt and shame being useless. And yet there's an interesting perspective that was also shared from Lori in the chat. She said that guilt and shame are signs that you're ready to shift. So you can, when you feel guilt and shame, you can also do a happy dance about what's making you feel guilty or shame-filled, and feel free to share it, because it can be
Yeah,
breakthrough.
that's awareness. Yeah, that's true. I agree, Laurie. I 100% agree on that one. That's the best part about this personal development. When you see something, you go, I remember one day I was sitting at home, and it was one of those enlightened moments where I sat there and I went, I'm depressed. And then I thought, what am I going to do? So I quickly got my notepad and I got my pen and I started to write out everything I was grateful for, because the awareness landed. And I'm like, yeah. And then I just started to do everything I could. And then I found out later, when depression comes on and they'd invented the Rubik's Cube, they used to chuck people a Rubik's Cube because the hand motion that was required with the brain messages, it helped to change the chemicals and step it out. So by me automatically going and getting a notepad and writing all of my things out, I was doing this essentially to get me out of my depression. So yes, when you can recognize or have somebody in that second level say, oh, you're in a guilt and shame pattern, then yes, you're able to go, cool, I've got something to work with. And that is part of the acceptance and part of the great gift that, you know, you've got two sides to every coin. So yeah, if you know what you're working with, boom, off you go.
So it's back to awareness. If guilt and shame are driving you day to day and you're not even aware of that, you just think, oh, this is what life is. Yeah, it's serving no purpose, and something needs to wake you up to that. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, when you keep missing out on, you know, and that can lead into sabotage, self-sabotage. When you're sitting in a guilt and shame pattern and you're wondering why every new person that comes into your life thinks you suck after a couple of days, and you're like, oh, that must have been because I was cruel to that puppy dog when I was 3. I'm so ashamed of myself. No, it's just, but the energy and the energy ties that show up. And I learnt recently, I read an article with some neuroscience with the neural pathways. When you start, so guilt and shame can start from a really early age. It doesn't have to be something that's most recent. So when you have a neural pathway start and your comprehension skills and your awareness tell you, I'm on the right path. So just for example, a neural pathway is a dot. Life happens, a new situation or event happens that's similar to this one. New dot, 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 dot. By the time you're at our age group and you have something happen and your story has told you you're worthless from this first incident all the way through. So then you get to this thing and you go for a job interview and you miss out. And your brain says, see, you weren't going to get it because you're not good enough. And the neural pathway fires and gives you a hit of dopamine, which is your reward chemical. So energy work breaks those neural pathways so your reward chemical doesn't hit when it says, see, we told you you were worthless. Look, you were right. And that's what energy therapies do to the patterns, because they're an energetic snip, and you go into your quantum physics and things. But that was a big interesting thing for me about why some people get stuck, because there's a chemical bonus for staying in that story. So it does take a huge amount of awareness and a huge amount of personal, I don't want to feel like that anymore, and I'll do what I can to get it done. And you find new alternatives to do it.
Right. Yeah, it takes a conscious choice. That oldest thought, the biggest rut, is the easiest one to fall into. You know, habitually thinking or action-wise, and yeah, it takes effort to go, no, I gotta blaze a new trail in my own brain to get me into a happier, better feeling place.
That's right. Yep. And you can do that with therapies and people who are trained in being able to create blockage. There is science. I read a science article, I'm sure I've shared it on my page somewhere, I must find it, that has the actual science behind breaking a neural pathway and energy. That's what, when it was, because the amount of times I'd said over the years, this is breaking the synapse in your brain. And I knew what a synapse was, but neurologically I didn't. And then I saw this science paper and I'm like, oh, that's what I do. That's what I do. Without probes.
Good for you. We need less probing in the world, huh?
Yes. There are no body fluids required.
So I am curious about your take on the relationship between the stories and the neural pathways that are created from repeating the stories, and that cellular memory, the linkages between the cellular memory. Is it like all one big nasty stew, or is there some type of a path or linkage that you can follow from step to step to step that allows
Yes.
that? Yeah.
Emotional trauma is very clever. What happens is when you tap into your story and you look at the emotions attach itself to different parts of your body. So that's why I was saying, as I love this book, The Secret Language of Your Body by Ina Segal. And there's also a lot of research and therapies in place. There's my first step into it was neuro-emotional technique, which is an energy therapy developed by a chiropractor back in 1985. And it taps into the Chinese body clock. So when you look at things like the liver, and liver is associated with anger. Now, this is where you can also bring in, so I operate from the trio of health. I work on a triangle, which has a fourth side to it, which is the spiritual up the top. So my triangle's a little bit of a weird shape. So it's the emotional, structural, and chemical, okay? Mm-hmm. So what happens is, if you are somebody that has had a lot of reason to be angry in your life, your liver is the organ of the body that processes anger. So then if you're sitting there and you need a sugar hit or you're addicted to sugar, my first thing is, what are you angry about? What have you had happen in your life that's made you angry? Because the liver is the organ that processes the sugar. Now, that's not to say that you've gone and grabbed yourself, a bottle of Coca-Cola or a handful of sweets or something like that. It can also be eating dairy food and wheat, which turns into a sugar really quickly. It's how the body processes what you eat. So from that perspective of, I want to lose weight, then it's go and have a look at what you're eating and what it's processing. Kidney is associated with fear. So if you have lived in high, hypervigilant states where fear is a big part of your life, go and join the dots to the fear. Your stomach, the emotion associated with stomach is disgust. So those sorts of things where you've had different things happen in your life and you've got that feeling, the ew feeling, that sort of thing. So there's the whole raft. So there's a big chart, and then it can link it through to, so with chiropractic, if an adjustment wasn't holding, then they go and have a look and see whether it's an emotional thing, and they can clear out the emotion, and then your adjustment will hold. And your spine is the core, it's the central part of your immune system. So with that, with the emotions and with the different parts, the different things that show up in life, and you are able to then join the dots to what segment. So, children that are adopted, they have huge rejection issues and abandonment issues. So you can go and have a look and find those keywords and see what element of the body that it's going to go and sit in. You have meridians that hold different things, which is why acupuncture is very good, because they can tap into the meridian system and release different things as well. So the body, in all its miraculous glory, together with our base human emotions, give you all of these clues on where to go and how to heal things. Your brain is your computer program. It's your, the amount of times I've said in sessions, it's like you're being defragged because there's so much confusion. When you have cancers and they show up in the body, secondary cancers are always an interest to me. So if somebody presents in my practice with a cancer, I always ask them to get what the secondary cancers are in that type of cancer, because there's science with that, so that we can address and make sure that when we're digging through things that we address those issues as well. So for example, liver being a secondary cancer, the anger that you would feel at having this land on your lap and then having to deal with it, and then if kidneys are involved, the fear involved with chemo and pain and leaving your family and leaving your kids or all those sorts of things, it's really easy to join the dots. So while it looks like it's a big complex bucket of mess, when you have people that are able to sit there and help you join the dots, it becomes really clear. And you can get those things and you can put them in their little box, and you can heal it and cut the ties and send it off and do all of the actual work that you need to do with things. And then you come out the other side and you have better outcomes with your illness, from the point of you might get a cold, but you recover in a couple of days. Or, the people I work with the cancer, I work with them as they're going through their chemo schedule. And the ones that I've worked with have had to explain to people, yes, I'm sick, because they're not getting the reactions. Like the last lady with breast cancer that I worked with didn't even lose her hair. So, but she also addressed her diet and followed to the law what the doctor said to do with her medication. Did all of the energy work and emotional work with me. We found what the core issue was and cleared that out, but it takes time. And you can get to the other end. As far as things like depression and thinking that the responsibility and things like that, you want to look at familial stories, and also from an energy perspective, look at, and from Real Men Feel, look at the stories of the men before you. Look at the way the feminine treated the men before you. Look at the story of the feminine and how they were treated by the masculine in their generation, and how that has linked into the relationships that have brought you up. I've just started doing some work with a group of people around cutting energy ties with the family tree. So it's just bringing in a visual of a family tree with branches and little faces like on Ancestry.com and bringing it in and asking to see what the energy tie is. It's only one step, and it's obviously not a one-time fixes all. But if you want to get stuff done, get in and try that. So
I have to go back really quick to what you're saying about anger and the liver, because my husband has spent, the 15 plus years that we've been together, he's always had anger issues. He gets very angry very quickly. And when he gets upset, it's amazing how it triggers off his liver. And he ends up having to take a special herb that we get from Peru in order to be able to settle the liver down again. And, the headaches go away and everything else. So I thought that was really, really fascinating, that particular linkage. And I'm going to definitely be sharing what you shared tonight with him, so he could actually, get a little better on that. But there's a question here in the chat from Leslie, which is a fantastic question. So it says, my son keeps picking up virus after virus. He's 14. What do you think I should address when it comes to food and emotions? Personally, she thinks that it's about being liked and overdoing things.
Viruses mean feeling out of control, vulnerable, easily manipulated and affected by others, criticized, harassed, threatened, attacked, and behaving like a victim. So the other part that when he gets a virus, what happens? Is he Is he going to bed for 2 or 3 days at a time? Is he getting vomity bugs or diarrhea, those sorts of things? Because that's where you also want to drill down as to why. And then it is a big question especially with children and teenagers and things, and peer pressure, understanding where they feel like they don't have a voice. Sickness. Okay, so this is a little bit of a high level comment, and again, it's a generalization. He gets diarrhea, stomach, and high fever plus sinus issues. Okay. Sinus issues is being angry at one person and usually someone close. So if a parent is pushing the buttons or something like that, or a close friend or a teacher, somebody they trust, that would be what I would be looking at there. What was I saying with the other thing?
So diarrhea, stomach, high fever as well.
Okay. All right, so let's quickly go and have a look. Fevers generally do mean an infection. So as long as it's not spiking into the space of, having those seizures, then it's just allow and moderate, but also finding your voice. So diarrhea is feeling uncomfortable with decisions you've made, unsure how to ask for help, feeling helpless, lost, unsupported, insecure, and confused, experiencing fear and apprehension. I would be looking at stuff going on with school, and is there a change happening? Is there going into a new set of study or new group of friends? All of those sorts of things. The other thing with teenagers, are they really going to be so open to talking about things? Because that perception of, I don't want to get in trouble. Kids lie because they think that the consequences are 10 times worse than if they tell the truth. But, subliminally giving hints like, oh, I was on this radio show the other day and they were talking about this, this, and this. Maybe we just, does that ring a bell? And then just plant the seed and let them do it themselves. But from the point of, that's what I was going to say, illness, and again, that's what I wanted to address. This is a high-level generalization. This doesn't apply to, and I'm not going to say it because to kick anybody in the gut, so to speak. It's not something that is meant to cause you distress. It is what I have realized through my work and why I'm doing this as my purpose in life. When you get sick, it is your body's way of taking you out of a situation that you don't know how to handle. So you are unsure what to do now. Generally speaking, if you're in a family situation or friends or family and you present as sick, they're not going to sit there and go, toughen up, sunshine, get over it, because you've turned into a snot machine and expelling other fluids out of your body like a rapid machine gun. They're going to cut you some space. Or you're too sick to go to school, so you stay at home. Or you're too sick to go to work, so you stay at home. And you try and get through whatever you can. Now, from my mind, from an energy perspective, illness comes when you're being too stubborn to do the work and do the acceptance and own up. So illness comes to drop your resistance to a point where you go, I will do anything to get this to go, which is a good thing. Okay, so as long as and again, this is stuff to do with catching it quickly. If you have recurring things that can turn into something nasty down the track, then that's a whole nother discussion when it's dealing with cancer and things. I have a very big theory about that one. But from an illness, it's like Laurie said earlier, it's a great thing when guilt and shame, when you recognize guilt and shame show up. Oh, I've got something to work with. A virus shows up, they can't give you any medication because it's viral, there's nothing to give you. Oh, ... we have an emotional issue here, what are we dealing with? And then you can start.
So illness can be your survival mechanism.
Absolutely. Yes.
So L'Oreal,
It's the biggest and first sign that something's wrong.
I just want to share something really like, so this has always happened to me. Not so much anymore because I learned how to say no, but I would say yes to things I didn't want to go to. And if I really didn't want to go, the day the event would be happening, I would have like the worst migraine and I would have to cancel. Because the only way I could cancel would be if I was sick, right? Because like I would feel too like I would do it. I have to go. So the only way out for me was to get physically sick. And so I would get a migraine, right? Puking sick from the migraine, and it would be gone. Like I would have to call the person and go, "Oh, I can't make it. I have a migraine. I'm so sorry." And then like within like an hour after that, the migraine would be gone. But and then finally, as over the years, you know, you do enough work, and I was like, whenever I say yes to something I really don't want to do, I get sick. So now when that happens, I get a feeling in my gut, and I call the person right away and go, I was mistaken. I can't do what I said I could do. It sucks. I'm getting better at learning how to say no. But if I say yes and I get that feeling, I know I have to handle it immediately. Otherwise, I'm going to get sick from it. So it's I just want to share that, because that's an easy one, right? Because it's a simple like, oh, I get a migraine. It's very easy to connect that. Like, I only get migraines when I have to do something I don't want to do.
Yeah, but if you think about migraines, I think I've had one of those in my life, like could not get my head up off the pillow. This is that's part of the equation. We are paying such a heavy price ourselves. Like from the pain that I felt with my migraine, I giggle now because I understand what it is, but it was like, oh no, I have a tumor. It's like, it was that bad. Okay, but that fear that you go into, and then all of this extra because it's so bad, where all you've got to do is say no. And that's something, in my Kami group last week, we just started working on the notion of being allowed to change your mind. As you're working through your people pleasing, one of the greatest gifts you can give to yourself and to others is to say, you know what, I said yes to that, but that's not really what I meant. And I'm really sorry to disappoint you, because you are. You don't want to string people along. That's one of the biggest things I learned with people pleasing when I was doing the work on it, where we're just manipulating people. When we're being people pleasers, we're just manipulators. And that sounds disgusting. And as soon as that word was put to me, I'm like, nope, stop. I'm not doing that. I'm not manipulating anyone. But the price that we pay, it's unnecessary. You know, and it comes back to that connotation, or that concept rather, that I said before about kids tell lies because they think the outcome will be twice as bad as just telling the truth. And that's what we're doing when we do that. So when your body makes you sick, to give you a valid reason, it's a lack of self-worth and a self-love, because you don't think your no is enough, which is then you track along and go and have a look at all the patterns where your no has meant nothing to all of the people who are important to you. And when you do that, you sit there and you go, oh, and then you keep the pins away from voodoo dolls because of the people that you recognize that have gone, you're not allowed to say no. You're not allowed to have any emotions. You're not allowed to feel like that. That's when, you know, again, personal development is not a walk in the park, but when you get onto those big ticket items, everything else underneath it becomes really easy to shift. And that's a biggie, Laurie, thinking that a migraine is an easier way out, knowing you can't get your head off the pillow, you're vomiting your toes up, and, you know, in drama speak, feel like you're dying.
Right.
Just because you meant to say, no, I can't attend your Tupperware party. It's like, oh.
Right?
I know. Tupperware.
It's pretty scary. I mean, like, you know me, Amanda, so you know that, like, I do a lot of work around that, the people pleasing and the boundaries and all that. And
yes,
the guilt and the shame that go with it, and realizing that, you know, because you were talking about the guilt, and it was fabulous, and the shame, and how when that comes up, like, it's a sign that you're clearing something, because when you feel shame, you're not in alignment with your true self, and that means that action is what's out of alignment, not the shame. The action that's created, right? So, like, if you feel guilty about something, and it's quite fabulous. Like, I love this work, and I love that you're doing this and helping people, because I always say, when you feel guilt or shame, you should be doing the happy dance, because that means you figured something out that's not okay for you to do, you know, in your system. Not that you should do it. Like, saying no used to make me feel shameful, but like, you have to say no. But I was like, what is it about saying no that brings shame that I won't even? And shame, I wrote earlier, is silent. So you won't share that in it, like, oh, I'm not a good person because I can't help those people, because I can't say yes to everything. That's shame. Feeling guilty because you can't make an event is one thing, but shame is all about, you know, I'm a bad person because I can't do this, not I did something bad. It's about how we feel, right? And that's why it's so quiet, you know, that's why it's so silent. But being able to speak it relieves the shame. And
as you were saying that.
For men too, because men, I think, care so much more silently than women. We're much more apt to talk about it amongst ourselves. Well, I shouldn't really say that. I certainly wasn't willing to talk about it for many years, but I think men really struggle with that as well, that sharing of shame, because it's meant to keep you stuck.
Yeah. And whose story are you attached to? That was a big thing. As you were saying that, I just went, oh, of course. When you're stuck in a pattern of shame, the first question that you get to ask yourself is, who has taught me this? Whose story have I taken ownership of? Because that's one of the key parts of our learning. And from the Real Men Feel, I know my whole generation were girls, but my parents both grew up in homes that were emotionally violent, and actually physically violent in one home. And this keep up appearances thing, what will people think, was a key message from my mum. So, like, at the moment, I'm still writing my book, Chronicles of a People Pleaser. I'm more than halfway through. But I had to do some work recently on recognizing I had an uncle proposition me for sex when I was 26 years old. So I was an adult woman. He'd been in my life since I was 4 years old. And he, for whatever reason, decided to be sexually attracted to me. Now, the shame aspect, the guilt and shame, was my story back when it happened when I was 26, was I went immediately to, what is my aunt going to say? My aunt was my mum's sister. I don't want to lose her. Oh my God, what did I do to get him to do that? I owned it. But one of the things that I realized recently was I was the child. It didn't matter how old I was. I will always be the child in that relationship. Doesn't matter whether I'm 40 and he's in his 70s. So I had, and again, part of it's an ever-ending process as the new layers show up. But the energy of the shame that I felt over the years, because my response to him when he asked me, I was, you fight, flight or freeze. I went into freeze, and the only thing that came out of my mouth was, I'll think about it, because I didn't know what to do. I had no point of reference as to, what do I do with this? I don't know what happens when a family member becomes sexually attracted to you. Bloody hell. So my only point, so there was a whole heap of guilt and shame about that sentence. None whatsoever of sitting there and saying to anyone in my family, he was the grown-up. He shouldn't have said that to me. He should have been able to control himself. I don't know what to do with that. All I could think of was losing my aunt and my cousins. So part of the process is to tap into where my story came, that I had to own that. And then with a couple of other things that I remembered in my life, you know, I went and told my mum, and as soon as she said it heard come out of my mouth, she said, "Don't tell your father." The same thing when I had a cousin touch me when I was a child, told my mum, "Don't tell your father." And that whole family was all about keeping up appearances. We can't let anybody know, because they used to hide the fact that my nana and granddad used to fight like cats and dogs. So it was because we have to appear to be a certain level of family. So this covert responsibility came in, and then as I turn into an adult and I recognize I get triggered by something, I'm like, oh, that's what that was. Hand it back.
So shame, shame is getting taught. Generations are passing it down and teaching people to grow up that way. Wow, that's
absolutely. We're a product of our upbringing. It's the awareness that sets us apart from the new way of life. What, you know, and as with Laurie, with her work with boundaries, what's okay and what's not okay. What's not okay is paying the price for something because you have been taught and have evolved to a place of being too frightened to say no.
And much like trauma, our trauma is up to the individual to decide what's right and wrong, and a boundary is up to each individual to define for themselves too, right?
Absolutely. So when you go into trauma with something or something happens, your innate reaction at the moment that it happens is right and valid. You must honor those, because within a nanosecond of that moment, all of the plates will start spinning, which will force you into a different behavior or a more catastrophic behavior. Then all of your story starts taking over.
I believe we've been talking about this really all along, but I know from your work you talk about the emotional immune system a lot.
Yes.
So you want to define that or give a little more structure to that?
Yeah, emotional immune system is you might have an immune system that's, weak in some regards, so that you get viruses often, or you get tonsillitis often. People that, I'm sure it's the same in the US, but we've just started the radio ads over here about telling everyone to go to the doctor and get their flu jab to protect them from getting the flu this year. And my husband and my mother-in-law get it every year without fail. Do they get the flu each year? Yes, they do. But it's just because they don't want to do the work. And I've tried to point out to my husband, I don't get it, and we're in the same house. What do you suppose that means? It's got to mean something. So we have quality hygiene standards here as well. So if somebody does get sick and manky, they're relegated to a room with their own tissues, and we're not allowed to hugging and kissing and all that sort of stuff. So we're not stupid.
Are you making flu shame?
Yes. It's like, ew, there is some colored stuff coming out of your face. Go and hide in the back room. What will people think? And that's, honestly, Andy, that's a big thing for me. I have a lady that's in my circles as well. She's a medical nutritionist, high level, has a science degree, everything. Her husband is like morbidly obese. And she had to deal with a lot of guilt and shame that she couldn't encourage her husband to follow what she was scientifically qualified to do in a small town. And the amount of stuff that she was owning because he didn't want to. And it's the same with me. If one of my kids gets sick, I've done a lot of work on it. It's like, I'm the emotional immune system person. What's going on? What are people going to say? But now it's like Laurie says, we've got something to work with here. What are we going to do? Because I can't expect my kids are going to go through life without snot.
Who would want to?
Yes, that's true. It's true. But
Well,
yes, the emotional immune system is a facet of the immune system. So you have your structural immune system. If your spine is healthy, you will have a better chance of getting through anything that comes up to make you sick. When you address your emotional immune system, you will have a better chance of getting through something quicker. If you get into your emotional immune system early, I have high expectations for my children, for example, because they were born, they chose me to be their mum. They are born and have this story in there every day. So that my youngest kid rolled his ankle the other day, and I was able to sit there with him and say, this is what ankle injuries mean. What's going on at school? So he's in high school. It's all new. He's in overwhelm a lot of the time, but he's also the youngest child, and he's trying to not get in trouble for things that he saw his older brother get in trouble for. So it's piled up. So how do we get ourselves out of that situation? We can't walk properly, so we can't do this and we can't do that, and mummy and daddy will feel sorry for me. Not this mummy. But we got to work through it. I got to sook him and like sit there and rub his foot, but while I'm doing that, I'm talking to him, giving him permission to let go of all of this belief system. But this is the other thing. He's come up with that belief system on his own because of what he saw with his brother. And his brother, and I'm the eldest of my generation. My son is the eldest of his generation. I have no point of reference. I came from a generation of girls. God gave me 2 boys. I remember when they put Tim on my chest, and I'm like, a boy? What am I going to do with a boy? But I'm happy about that, and I'm glad I have 2 sons. But there's these soul agreements that are coming into place that, as in awareness, we get to work it out, so that my kids will grow up without significant illness or disease. And that's how we will be, that's what I'm hoping that people will adopt into their family too, so that the generations that come after us will be healthier and happier. Everybody's got to die, and everybody's got to die in certain ways. But if we can reduce the suffering attached to it, you've got a happier humanity.
Right. So we're running out of time tonight, but do you have one tip to share for how to improve emotional resiliency or emotional immune system? Is there one thing that works for the most people?
Just ask the questions. What is this teaching me? Or what is this showing me? Be curious. Don't go into judgment. If you're sitting there and you're looking at other people or looking at yourself, stay curious. What is this doing? Google is your friend. Ask people, seek out. As soon as you set the intention of, I don't want this in my life anymore, please bring me somebody that will show me, and then look for the unorchestrated. All of you guys came into my life in an unorchestrated way. I have a really cool story about that. But look how much we match. We didn't know each other from a bar of soap 18 months ago. And then all of a sudden I'm sitting there, so I'm going to take responsibility for this. I'm sitting there saying, I want a new tribe. I want some cool people that understand what I'm talking about. So then the universe got its arm and swept the top of my table off and went, there you go, Amanda. And here you all are. And we have enjoyed over 12 months of connection, even though we're in 2 different parts of the world. But when we speak about this stuff, we're not sitting there looking at each other thinking we've got 3 heads and we need to back away in the corner.
Cool. And to back it all up to your notion of the levels of awareness, being curious, asking more questions. Again, first you have to be aware that something's up, and then that second level is asking and taking some action around it.
That's right. Asking, talking, speaking, not being frightened to speak up about something. And then the third level, because sometimes speaking can be enough. Speaking about things can give you the freedom that you need to step forward through your fear. It's the stuff that's really stuck. And when you're really stuck, then you go and you find somebody like me or you guys or Laurie and even, I don't know, are you still doing your readings sometimes, Appio? Like the amount of ahas that Appio gave me in a session once. I'm sitting there thinking, it wasn't very long, but it was enough, because I was at that stage of, I just want this to go. And then Appio, fresh brain, fresh head, fresh set of comprehension skills, boom, 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 happy man done. So that's what it is. Ask the question, speak about it, take action. If it isn't feeling right, take some more action.
Beautiful. So what action can listeners take that want to get in touch with you and see what you're up to?
They can jump on my website, amandafoy.com.au is my website. I have a group format that I deliver energy sessions. So I call it, it's like having a multivitamin every Monday for Australians and Sunday for the Northern Hemisphere. It's an energetic multivitamin. You come in and you say what's going on, and then you leave the rest to me. And I do a group energy session. Everybody is protected in there. Nobody's energy can touch anybody else's. That was a very important part of how I built it. You say what you need to say. I do the energy session. There's quite a few people in there now, and the amount of people that go, were you just talking to me this week? And I kind of say yes. And even though it's a group format, it's interesting how the global consciousness works, but it just starts taking it away, and it's gentle. So there's nobody lying on the floor in the fetal position, not coping with life either. I don't do that kind of
work. Good for that. Yes, good. So that you have boundaries when it comes to people you work with too, then.
Yes, I need people to be able to function.
No fetal positions, no middle fingers coming from the fetal position.
Awesome. Well, I think this was a really fascinating conversation I had tonight. So, Amanda, I want to thank you once again. Thank you, Leslie and Laura, for being here live, asking questions, taking part. And thank you, Appio, for sure. If you're looking for the link, we'll have the link in the show notes for this episode. And next week, we'll be live again next Tuesday, February 28th at 8 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be joined, continuing guests from Down Under. We've got Kirsty and James Greenshields.
I love it!
So I know I've met them through you. So why don't you give us a little tease? What are Kirsty and James like? What are they going to be talking about?
They will be talking to you about their story. They're both ex-military, and how they've gotten through their PTSD, the strength of recognizing their relationship and finding their voice and being able to speak their truth, but from such an amazing, unconditional place of love. It's an extraordinary story. The work that they're doing here in Australia for men's health it's groundbreaking. To have a man in your circles that is so full of integrity. It's the masculine. It is the healed masculine standing there saying to men who are suffering that it's okay in the most masculine, loving way possible. But he gives you all of these tools. And then when his wife comes in and she speaks as well to the story and from a relating point of view, and what she saw and recognized in the pain in her husband and what she did to allow him to shift it through her truth. It's going to be a very popular episode for you. They are truly the most amazing people. And James, he just floats my boat. The way he handles things, what his story, what he's been through, he's an extraordinary human. I'm so glad to be walking the earth with these two people as well. They're great. You'll have a really good show.
So that is quite a testimonial. So glad to be walking the earth with them. Yeah. So thanks for making that connection. Thanks for joining us tonight. And again, until next time, everyone can check out realmenfeel.org, join the Real Men Feel group on Facebook, share what you thought of this show, give us a review on iTunes, comment on the blog, share the show. And you can always reach out to us at realmenfeel@gmail.com. Whew. Thanks for a great show. I love that you mentioned NET. That was the first thing I ever was introduced to as energy work from like 10 years ago. I've never heard people talk about it. So that was neat.
I've been living it for 30 years. That's how I'm 46, and I was 15 when my chiropractor tried it with me. So that was my big dawning. I'm like, I know what my path is. I've been living it since I was 15. The amount of people that have teased me and made fun of me about me trying to connect the dots for them in my life. I can't wait till I'm a global voice on a very big stage, because I'm going to call them out. Look at what I'm talking about now.
You're going to rub that dot out.
We're not just going to connect them. No.
Right. Well, thanks again,
Thanks
everyone.
for having me, guys.
It was a pleasure,
Absolutely.
Miranda. Appio, thanks.
Anytime, my friend.
Thank you for listening to Real Men Feel. Until next time, visit realmenfeel.org, join the Real Men Feel group on Facebook, and share what you thought of this show. Please give this podcast a review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you are discovering Real Men Feel. Reach out to us at realmenfeel@gmail.com. Learn more about Andy Grant at theandygrant.com and Appio Hunter at appiohunter.com.